Spanning throughout the 1920s, the Harlem Renaissance was a time of exploration through arts such as music, literature, and fine arts. The early 1900s marked the beginning of the Great Migration, when many African Americans looking to escape racism in the South, such as Jim Crow laws and lynching, came to the North in hopes of unskilled labor jobs and less discrimination. As the African American population in the North began to grow, many strong black communities were formed, which helped to evolve the black culture and racial pride. Harlem was an especially significant African American community that helped to popularize many musicians, artists, and activists such as Langston Hughes, Louis Armstrong, Palmer Hayden, and Marcus Garvey. These people helped found a strong sense of racial pride in Harlem. Literature and poetry would become a huge factor that would lay a foundation for the upcoming civil rights movement. The poem If We Must Die, written by Claude McKay, helped rally blacks in Harlem. It was originally intended for men fighting in World War I, but in Harlem, people interpreted the poem as a call to arms to begin fighting for civil rights. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, marking their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back. This poem and many others helped to influence a cultural movement in Harlem. The New Negro, a collection of essays and stories written by Elaine Locke, inspired African Americans to become part of their communities and encourage desegregation. Negro life is not only establishing new contracts and founding new centers, it is finding a new soul. There is a fresh spiritual and cultural focusing. We have, as the heralding sign, an unusual outburst of creative expression. There is a renewed race spirit that consciously and proudly sets itself apart. Langston Hughes contributed to the zeitgeist of the Harlem residents with his poetry, like The Negro Speaks of Rivers. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when the dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. This expressed the theme of black is beautiful and built on the idea of the new Negro. Harlem was known as the Black Mecca and the capital of Black America. Because of this, many black advocates, artists, entrepreneurs, and intellectuals were attracted to Harlem. The arrival of different businesses, talents, and ambition created a melting pot of culture. When people migrated from the South to Harlem, they brought their culture and customs, which included music such as ragtime, blues, and traditional African American folk songs. Music, like poetry, became a particularly important form of expression for the African American community in Harlem. Jazz and the blues were performed by black musicians at white-only establishments like the Cotton Club. Many famous black entertainers like Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, and Nat King Cole performed at the Cotton Club. The success of black entertainers contributed to the racial pride of many African Americans. This demonstrated how African Americans were beginning to mix with white Americans in the world of musical composition. This made jazz and blues become more popular outside of the black community and promoted desegregation and a new relationship between black and white people. During this time of musical growth in Harlem, the black community was also experiencing a growth in political and civil activism, which created the foundation for the civil rights movement of the coming decades. During the 1920s, many activists were concerned with the racism that was still so strong in the United States, even after the end of the Civil War and the emancipation of slaves. A huge contributing piece to this growth in activism was the growth in magazines and literature dedicated to issues in the black community. The Crisis became an extremely popular magazine that started in 1911 and continued to publish monthly publications that feature the works of many Harlem Renaissance writers, such as Zora Neale Hurston, Jesse Redmond Fawcett, Langston Hughes, and Jean Toomer. Funded by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Crisis published poetry, articles on recent events, and essays on social injustices and culture. The founder and editor, W.E.B. Du Bois, claimed that the Crisis's goal was to help spread the knowledge of issues and injustices that would unify and encourage people to participate in the nascent civil rights movement. The object of this publication is to set forth those facts and arguments which show the danger of race prejudice, particularly as manifested today towards colored people. These thinkers and writers helped to lay the foundation of the civil rights movement. The Crisis became a catalyst for this movement. The Harlem Renaissance was a significant time period for music, fine arts, and activism. An important theme during this time period was the idea of the new Negro, which encouraged African Americans to become a force in society. Activists like Marcus Garvey popularized Pan-Africanism, a movement aimed to unify and uplift all people of African descent. Musicians such as Duke Ellington helped to bring the music of jazz from race records to a larger audience. Writers like Langston Hughes helped to create a new generation of literature oriented around social issues and activism. These are the people who made up the Harlem Renaissance, and their contributions to the time period went on to affect many generations afterwards. Harlem Renaissance, Harlem Renaissance, Harlem Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance. This demonstrated how African Americans were beginning to mix with white African Americans. Okay.